I wanted to start the program by just telling you very quickly, I think we're going to be joined by a representative of the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department coming up in about 20, 30 minutes on the air. That's a standard routine thing we do on the second Thursday of every month. And then I was going to tell you what else we have coming up this morning. I may have another guest on the way in a few minutes, but I say I may because my planning book is sitting on my desk. Where normally I bring it in, I throw it open to the day, and I realize everything we're going to be doing during the next couple of hours of the show. But this morning I ended up stopping into Benito Baez's office just before I went on air because I wanted to ask him a quick question. And I got the question in, we chatted for a couple of minutes, and I realized I'm pressing the envelope when it comes to time. So I dashed down the hall and into the studio, and I came in here without my planner. I was asking him, though, a question about, I think, a very serious matter. There was a news conference. Idaho State Police are holding at 10:30 this morning, and it's to give the findings of an officer-involved shooting. Now, it's not the one you may be thinking about, the shooting that took place a couple of weeks ago in Adams County where a rancher was killed in a dispute with a couple of sheriff's deputies. That is not the case. That one is still under investigation, and it may well be under investigation for many more weeks to come. But there is a separate news conference today about a separate officer-involved shooting, and that's on the way in just a short while. 808, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 37 this morning, and I want to thank you all for joining us. Can I add something to this? Benito and I were having a quick conversation. The chatter that I'm reading online, Facebook and in other social media about the shooting in Adams County, a lot of people out there have already decided that the two deputies who were involved are guilty and that there is a whitewash going on. In fact, whitewash was one of the words someone used it to explain it to me. If you weren't there, then how would you know? First question. Now, we brought this up on the program before. Had an angry caller a couple of weeks ago who just doesn't like police officers or sheriff's deputies and wanted to share with us, vent his spleen about how apparently they're all getting up every morning thinking, aha, before the day ends today, I am going to shoot me a rancher. Yes, I am. And then I'm going to come home and carve another notch in my bedpost. Where do you get that idea that these people get up in the morning and head out to work and they have this in mind? And I was sharing a quick story with Benito. I was driving through Vermont, probably close to 15 years ago, which is a relatively small state compared to Idaho, and I was headed for the bridge at the Champlain, it's called the Champlain Bridge, which crossed the southern end of Lake Champlain, and I was on my way to Crown Point, where the old British fort was located in upstate New York. That was it was a secondary fort to Ticonderoga back during the Revolutionary War, and it was a big battle scene and the like, and there's still the remnants of the British fort there, and I was on my way. In fact, my mother was traveling with me, and we were driving down this road when we suddenly came up on a roadblock that had been set up by Vermont State Police, and they were simply checking people's registrations. You can look at the sticker in your car window and the like, and doing all of those things, and seeing who had bald tires and who had good tires. Now, I'm not necessarily a big proponent of those types of stops. I think that we might go a little too far in those situations, but the average trooper, the average police officer, the average deputy doesn't have any choice in the matter. They're under orders because someone in government thinks this is a great idea, and that gets passed down then to their command, and then their command passes it down and says, you got to do this, okay? So now you know how that works, because my dad used to be involved in those when I was a kid. I know a little bit about how it works, and these guys would rather be out doing other things. And should we say women, too, because a lot of women are wearing the uniform. So I came up on this stop, and I see a trooper out in the middle of the road. He's standing there on the double solid yellow line, and he waves an arm at me, and I interpreted that to be, you can go ahead. And I started to roll along, and then he started waving both arms and say, hey, stop. And he didn't look too happy with me. And I rolled down the window, and you know what I said to him? I said, gee, I'm really sorry. I said, I saw it from the angle I was looking at. I saw your arm move and thought you were waving me through, and I apologize. And he looked back at me, and he said, oh, well, okay. And that was it. And then he let me through. He took a quick glance at my car and said, see you later. Have a good day. I didn't roll down the window and say, look, pig, you didn't give me the right hand signal, okay? I think his reaction would have been somewhat different, but I happened to be polite to him, and he was polite to me. And I've said it before on this program. The people who have the biggest issues with law enforcement usually have the biggest attitudes of their own. How is it some people go through life and never have any serious issues with law enforcement? Other people go through life and are constantly having issues with law enforcement. What is it? Does the law enforcer like somebody else's looks better than yours? Seems to me that stretches credulity in that situation. So I wanted to address that off the top of the show this morning because unless you happen to be at the scene, you don't know what happened. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. So let's just let the investigation take its course, and when it's done, I have my suspicions about what happened. I've already mentioned those on the air a couple of weeks ago right after this happened. But that's all I can do is surmise. I don't know. Let the investigation go forward, and I'll put it this way. I realize there are a lot of people that said this was a good guy, he lost his life, and in that situation something has to be done or needs to be done. But all of the people who are making the argument saying that it was wrongful all have some skin in the game in the sense that they happen to be relatives. It's 8:13. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 38 right now. Telephone number if you'd like to reach the show. It's fairly simple to do. You just dial 736-0300, 736-0300. My email address is bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. That's bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. And I do realize that sometimes there are situations people say, well, there are bad cops. There are bad radio announcers. There are bad television broadcasters. There are bad school teachers. There are bad ministers. Where does it end? Well, there's going to be people like that in every profession that you get involved with. I'll tell you what, I've worked with some real snakes over the years. I worked with a snake at a Sears department store many, many years ago. I was selling appliances and paints. It was my secondary job. And it was discovered that this one fellow on the floor we had to type in certain numbers in order to get credit on a sale. That is your commission. Well, this guy had figured out how to rig the system, and he was diverting a lot of other people's money his way. And you know what happened? There ended up being a fist fight on the floor. I wasn't there that day, but the guy ended up losing his job because he'd been stealing from his coworkers. He was a bad dude. I've worked in television. I used to work in television at a TV station back in the 1990s, and I remember one time I was sent out on an assignment, and I got there, and of course what happened was nothing was going on. And when I got back, the person who sent me out had changed the assignment board to make it look like I'd gone off on a wild goose chase all on my own. And when I said, wait a minute here, somebody got up and changed this board, I was told, no, that wouldn't happen. Well, that does happen. You work with a lot of people who are trying to cover their own behinds. But it happens in every profession, and yet most of the people I have worked with, the overwhelming number of people that I have worked with, no matter what I've been doing, whether I've been selling appliances, whether I've been selling suits, whether I've been in talk radio, whether I've been a news reporter, whether I've been working in radio, TV, or at a newspaper, any of those things, most people are pretty good. So can we leave it at that, at least for now? And as I said earlier, let the whole thing run its course, and then we can sit here someday and open up the telephones and have people vent their spleens about what they think may have happened, even though none of us happen to be there. Some of the other things I'd like to talk about this morning, if we have an opportunity, college campuses, the troubles that are going on in Missouri and Yale and various places happen to be spreading across the country. We have a situation that's going to just end up going into complete anarchy. And I don't know how we're going to address this, but you may have to get this, some law enforcers go in there and straighten things out. That looks like it's going to be the end game of all of this. And unfortunately, people are going to say, well, they didn't have to come in here and hit me over the head just because I was breaking the law. Well, a lot of people are going to think you deserve to get hit over the head. I had a thought about that this morning. I was getting some things ready for the show and reading some of the details about what's going on these campuses, and it struck me. And we're not talking just the minority students who are involved. Most college kids today, if you're of a certain working class background, you really don't pay anything to go to college. Some people make the choice to go off to a private independent college. Yeah, you'll pay the full freight, even if you're a poor person. You'll take out huge loans and the like. But a great many people in this country today, somebody else is paying your freight for you. And I was a student a long time ago. I've graduated college in May of 1984. But all the way back then, even in the midst of the Reagan years, a guy like me who came from a working class family, and even though I had a job and I was making money on my own, the government never asked me for details on my income. They just asked me for details on my parents' income. So I would fill out these forms every year. That had been at the advice of my high school guidance counselor. And then these enormous checks would come in the mail every semester. That's what I was seeing, and I don't know about these other students, but my guess is even today, a lot of them are in that situation. For a lot of students out there, it's just one great big welfare program. So why are they bitching? Why would they be out there making all of this noise? And right now as we're speaking up in Ithaca, New York, up in the Finger Lakes of upstate New York, there's a photograph up on TV right now of demonstrators out with their umbrellas demanding that the college president resign because he isn't sufficiently concerned about their feelings, which is what this is really all about. Did you know at the University of Missouri this whole thing got started because a couple of students claim somebody drove by in a pickup truck and yelled a racial slur? Didn't happen to be a student, perhaps. Could have been somebody from outside campus. And they said that the president of the campus wasn't sufficiently concerned that somebody used a bad word. Well, kids, when you get out there and you start working in regular life, and you're out on the streets and you're going about your business for the rest of your lives, you're going to meet people who are crude. We've just had a discussion about some people who you work with who are complete dolts. And you're going to find a lot of people out there like that. Nobody is there to ensure that your feelings never get hurt. Because the next step will be, somebody said something mean to me. The next step will be when you get an F on your term paper, you're going to claim that that hurt your feelings, and therefore that you need to have an A, whether you earned it or not. This is the complete unraveling of American culture, and it's all because the educational system has, over the last, at least 30 years, Miss Wright, my kindergarten teacher, she'd been teaching since the 1930s. She taught one of my uncles, in fact, when he was in kindergarten. She didn't think twice about wailing on our bottoms if we got out of line, and Mom and Dad didn't say, "How dare she?" Mom and Dad said, "Good for her." But by the time I was leaving school in the late 1970s, there was a new, call it paradigm, that had swept through teaching ranks and the educational system, and it said we have to tell everyone they need to be respected. And in order to do that, we can't yell at them and we can't discipline them. And even though that may have not been exactly how they phrased it, that's how it was interpreted by the kids. So we now have 2 or 3 generations of young people out there who think that they're entitled to all of these things. Man, are they ever going to get a surprise when it comes time to go out and actually have to work for a living and pay their bills, and eventually when Mom and Dad die and they no longer have the room at the Mom and Dad hotel, times are going to be rough. I've got more on this coming up in just a couple of minutes. If you were up late last night, some of us go to bed fairly early because of the job that we do, but if you were up late and you happen to catch the Kelley File on the Fox News channel, you would have found a discussion about what's going on these college campuses. Have you noticed it hasn't spread to places like Idaho? There used to be a wonderful young woman who'd come in here and sit with me last spring from the College of Southern Idaho, and she grew up on a ranch. Very conservative background. And we were out talking off air one day, and I mentioned sometimes behaviors of certain kids on campus. She said, "Well, there's a reason it doesn't happen at places like CSI." And I said, "Why is that?" She said, "Well, most of the students come from a particular background around here, and they don't go for that sort of thing." Makes you proud, doesn't it? And it shows you the value of good parenting and how the culture in this part of the country really still adheres to a lot of those old-fashioned values. So you don't have all of these anarchists running around making demands on campuses in places like Idaho or in Utah. Maybe to a lesser extent in Montana you could see it. And you definitely see it over in Washington State at a few of the universities. But not here in this part of the world. 823, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. One of Megan's guests happened to be presidential candidate Ben Carson. And Mr. Carson, of course, was not only a pediatric neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins University, but he was also a professor there. And he had a reaction to what's going on at old Mizzou and also at Yale and some of these other campuses.
We're being a little bit too tolerant, I guess you might say, accepting infantile behavior. And I don't care which side it comes from. You know, to say that I have the right to violate your civil rights because you're offending me is un-American. It is unconstitutional. And the officials at these places must recognize that and have the moral courage to stand up to it, because if they don't, it will grow, it will exacerbate the situation, and we will move much further toward anarchy than anybody can imagine, and much more quickly. We simply can't allow those kinds of things to happen, and we must encourage open dialogue. You know, it's the same thing that happens before people get divorced. They stop talking. The next thing you know, their spouse is the devil incarnate. That's what's going on, and we cannot allow that in America.
Now, Mr. Rogers, the Mr. Rogers of American politics, Ben Carson, is saying we have to have a dialogue. He means students really should start listening to people in administration, although the administrators created a great deal of the crisis that they now have. 824, we have a telephone caller with us, and you're up next. You're on News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as newsradio1310.com, and what's on your mind?
Maybe in the teachings of New York State, you never heard the phrase, universities as a laboratory of democracy, and all the young people, that's what they're doing. You cannot teach them what was taught in 1950s or in the 1970s.
How do they get an education in a tent out on the quad by not going to class?
And it's their world now. We live on their world.
Oh, it's their world,
they don't live on our world. We live on their world.
Is this the best that the liberals in Idaho can do? I mean, seriously. All of the plaudits this guy always lets loose with. It's their world now. Wow. Now, isn't that just profound? So, how do they get an education? It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. That was an old phrase going way, way back. It's certainly much worse now. When my dad came home from the Army, he just simply went down to Ford Stamping Plant, where he had been working, I think, before he actually went in the Army. And he went in and said, I want my job back. They said, when can you start? It was like 10 o'clock in the morning. He said, I'll be here 3 p.m. for the night shift. Sure thing. Then he thought, gee, I could probably use a few more dollars. So he drove over to Chevy Tonawanda. That's outside of Buffalo, New York. And he went in and he said, I'd like a job here. They said, when can you start? He says, I don't know, tomorrow morning. So he worked the day shift at one and the night shift at another. That's how easy it was to get a job then. When I graduated college, I had to spend the first year working doing the night audit in a hotel until I found a job that I really wanted. Took a while, but, that was a little more difficult. In today's age, you've got all these kids out there who are going to have to be competing not only with other people in the United States, but they're competing all over the world for an opportunity, an economic opportunity. And I think ultimately that's what they really want. They haven't been able to figure that out yet. But you know what? If you're not going to class and you're all out singing Kumbaya on the quad, living in tents and demanding that everyone resign who hurt your feelings, you aren't going to get very far. Because let me tell you, over in China right now, they're all working very hard to graduate 60,000 engineers a year in China. And to sit here and say, this is the laboratory of democracy. What democracy? They shout everybody down. Anybody who goes out and tries to talk to them, they say, I'm deeply offended, leave me alone. And then they start chanting and shouting. That's how that's been working. It happened at Yale last week. One of the professors who supposedly offended them by saying, if you don't like someone's costume, then don't look at it. Halloween costumes. That's how this all got started there. So the professor went out to talk to the students, and the students tried to rough up the professor and shouted the professor down. How is that the laboratory of democracy? It's the laboratory of basically the French Revolution. It's the laboratory of the Soviet Revolution. It's go out, beat up anybody you don't like, kill them or imprison them or whatever you have to do so we can square this away. I'm telling you right now, there is nothing democratic about what these young people are doing. They are cruising for a bruising is what they happen to be doing. This is not, as I said earlier, this is not going to end pretty. Anarchy leads to riots. Riots lead to civil war. The problem with that is all of these kids out on the quad, well, if it snows, they may have some snowballs to use in self-defense. But the people they'll be going up against, as happened at Kent State, my gosh, all the way back 45 years ago, they are much more heavily armed. We've got about a minute before the break. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX. Go ahead.
Hey, I was just calling to say this is just a little foretaste of things to come, because whether it's this election or the next one, there's going to be a economic and political correction happen. And when it does, these young people are going to riot all over the place. They are not going to like it. It's going to be like Greece was. Either take away this and that from them to get things back in line, and it's going to get real ugly in a hurry.
And I'm going to share something. Thank you for the call. I'm going to share something in the next hour if I get a chance to. And Walmart has decided it's not going to do its big dash through the store and people getting trampled and beating each other up for a $10 Chinese-made toaster. They're not going to be doing that the day after Thanksgiving this year. There is a great video called The Madness of a Lost Society that was issued several years ago after one of these types of situations. And the guy who put it together said, the day will come, let's say the trucks stop coming to the local grocery stores. What's going to happen after 3 days? We've already seen the preview of the way these people behave as they rush through the doors at Walmart, right? A caller makes a point that is, I think, very, very prescient in that matter, and that is, oh, good golly. You know what? You don't want to be around a big city when that's going to happen either. Bill Colley with you this lovely morning. It started to rain about an hour ago, just light rain. It doesn't look like we're going to get washed away today. That's a good thing. I've got more coming up in just a few minutes. Going to call it 38. I went out and grabbed my secret planter, so now I have that available. And I'm trying to manage that at the moment. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. I was actually running. I don't do a lot of that at my age anymore. News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's a big, long hallway, and then you have to hang a left turn. And then you have to go through the sales department, which is, believe me, you want to talk about dangerous. You think Walmart's tough the day after Thanksgiving. And so I had to run the gauntlet through that part of the office and then make my way back. And I only trampled a couple of people, but size 15 shoes, Penny says she'll be okay in a couple of months. So I'm looking through my planner here, but yeah, I had a couple of things I think that we had marked up for today, and I'd have not yet seen my guest, but that's okay. I mean, I'm spending my whole life talking to myself. You can reach our program today if you like at 736-0300, 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. That means you can hear us online anywhere, all over the world, by just clicking on that little listen live function. And we do have a few people I know of, some very demented old friends of mine who are listening online every day. This is from the Daily Caller. I happened to come across this morning. It says, in an erotic development, to say the least, protesters at the University of Missouri segregated themselves by race Wednesday night, having white students leave a gathering in order to create a black-only healing space. Well, are they going to bring in some sort of enchanter to, kind of bring a rattle in and shake the rattle a few times and purify it of the filthy whiteys? Is that the whole idea? Thank you for being here and helping us out for the first few days. Now get. After protesters attacked reporters who were attempting to cover the drama Monday at MU, the group attacked white media for failing to, quote, understand the importance of respecting black spaces, unquote. In other words, their turf. Isn't that like an old gang expression? How about this one? Now, wasn't Mr. Obama going to heal all of these wounds? I think we talked about that the other day. No such luck. Daily Caller reports this. Mizzou students hallucinate KKK on campus. Did you know that the KKK is considered to be a spent force? Even the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a gang of flaming communists down in Alabama, of all places, they say that there are only 8,000 members now of clans, various assorted clans around the country any longer, and they say none of those people, those assorted clans, can get along with each other. So they're not much of a threat to anyone else, just they brawl amongst themselves when they have their occasional cross burnings out there in the middle of a field somewhere. Twitter began to explode, the writer says, with students and others claiming that Klan members had been spotted walking around MU's flagship Columbia campus. I guess you would notice them, because if they had the robes on, they would stand out. And Halloween, as we say, was a couple of weeks ago. The rumors appear to have been given major life after MU student body president, Peyton Head, he was on the back of the line when they were giving out names, made a Facebook post declaring that the KKK sighting had been confirmed and that he was actively working with police and even the National Guard on the matter. Now, this is from a student. He's the student body president. Now, caller earlier said this is the laboratory of democracy. Obviously, this kid is a Democrat because, like Hillary Clinton, he's hallucinating things. You know, she was under fire. What was it in Bosnia? Oh, right, she wasn't, but she said she was, and that's the way she recalls it. Seems to me if someone was shooting at me, I'd have a pretty good idea whether it happened or not. You know, I'm sorry, but if you're hallucinating that, you got to ask what Hillary was smoking back when she was in college. He didn't inhale, but maybe she did. The writer goes on to say, barely an hour after the mania began, local police clarified that there was no evidence of any KKK activity on campus. Now, here's the thing. Some of the students were saying that these Klan members were accompanied by police. The police were working with them, and that police and Klan were going around the campus throwing rocks through dormitory windows. The problem is no windows were broken. So if you check the credibility of that versus the claim that the students made who got this whole row started and ended up getting the head of not only their college president, but his second in command as trophies, then it does question the veracity of their claims that somebody in a pickup drove by and said, hey, you black person, you are a If you can't get their story straight on the Klan supposedly being on campus this week, then perhaps it's all been made up just so they can go out there and have a big camp out in the middle of the quad. 8:36, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Here's this from Allen West Republic. Now, do you know who Allen West is? Yeah, great American hero. Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. Served in the United States Army for 22 years. He's a person of color. He is a black man, although he's not a flaming liberal. And he's writing at his website, he says it all began back in September when the black student government president complained that a racist drove by in a truck and allegedly called him a racial slur. Hey, racial slur! That's what it was. Then in September, a group of black students said that a drunken white racist shouted a slur at them too. Hey, I'll go to the beer. Get me one, you. Ah! So that's what started it. So he also quotes Ben Shapiro, who's a conservative writer in Washington, and says, in any normal world, without further evidence of the incidents, life would have gone on. Occasional ugliness from ugly people is a feature of living on Earth. Sure is. And then this is from the Washington Examiner today. The coming campus revolution. The writer is Ash Show. Speaking of people in the back of the line when names were handed out. We may be seeing, the writer says, the beginnings of a full-blown campus revolution, not a revolution based on actual oppression, but a revolution stemming from perceived oppression and a desire to attain victimhood status. See, if you're a victim, then you can go to the government and say, give me somebody else's money. Yeah, give me somebody else's property. There's an old cartoon I used to watch when I was a kid, and it was about these three mice who would, and they suppose it was three blind mice, but they were pretending, and they would dance around and say, we don't have to work, we don't have to work, we don't have to work. Back in the day when Americans actually thought that you should pull your own weight. The writer says protests sparked by hoaxes and questionable accusations are nothing new to college campuses. The students currently protesting over alleged racial discrimination may find similar recourse through Title VI. Another one of those Big Brother sort of Orwellian laws, which bans discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin. It's basically Title IX, but for race. And the writer says college students today, upon learning about systemic oppression of the past, are looking for a way to create their own movement. Cool, right? Because it's cool. To belong to something bigger than themselves so that they can look back someday and say they were part of something. The problem for them is the sexual and racial discrimination of the 50s and 60s no longer exists, so they have to invent or exaggerate claims in order to make it seem as if problems are widespread. I think that's a what you'd call very, very direct way to put that. Makes a lot of sense to me. If only their parents had actually given them a paddling once in a while. Well, I guess in the case of a lot of these students, if they'd had any parents, they might have gotten a paddling. But instead, they went off to school and they got coddled from kindergarten on. And people just kept passing them along and passing them along and passing them along. They will someday either be expelled from campus or they'll graduate with a basket weaving degree. And that's when the real day of reckoning is going to come, when they discover, sorry, in order to get by, you better produce. 20 minutes away from 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And they won't have Obama's bureaucracy after, 14 months from now. They won't have that to protect them. That'll be completely dismantled and gone.